Welcome to Word Blindness. You guys, I'm here with my co-host Brent Sopel, and then we have a very special guest, Dan Soviero. Did I say that right, Dan?
Soviero, very close.
I didn't.
Very close.
I did that to your
In the
wife too.
ballpark, close
Damn
enough.
it.
As long as it's spelled
Say it
right on the
again.
Right
paycheck, right?
ballpark.
You know, but say it again.
Soviero.
Soviero. I mean, everyone knows
Yeah.
that I mispronounce everything, but it's so funny. I don't remember why I thought, because I did that to Maddie. I think I had to say her name like 15 times. So we'll give a little context and introduce you as well. So welcome to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. So we found each other. You actually found me, I think, on LinkedIn. And it was when I had started Your Next Stop. And you said, I have a great guest for you. And it was your wife. And it was so awesome because we connected because of lacrosse.
So cute.
It was.
I'm a big I love my wife guy.
You
Always
are.
have fun.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
It's true. And she's awesome. And so it was great. We had such a nice conversation. And then over the years, we just kind of stayed in touch and done this. And there was a period, and I don't know how it kind of came about your dyslexia because, you know, and I think, I don't even know if I shared it with you, but like my son's dyslexic, my dad, my sister. But when I found that out, I was like, I have to have Dan on the podcast because we always meant to have you on Your Next Stop. And then you got busy because of creating Signature Lacrosse. And I can't wait to get in kind of some of that fun stuff. You started a podcast. You're doing things in Africa with lacrosse. I mean, you have Signature Locker. You have overnight sports camp. Maddie has all the stuff that she's doing. And it is, I mean, you guys are doing some amazing, amazing things. You're in Tampa, so you're warm. Brent was just talking about like minus 52 degrees. And we were like, oh, I don't like any of that talk. But I would love to get into some of the stuff that you're doing. Because one of the things that I remember when we first connected, you said you were playing lacrosse, you got hit in the back, and you had this like aha moment about a lacrosse ball. And so you became curious and you opened the lacrosse ball. You wanted to see what it was about. You wanted to see kind of what was inside. And Brent's laughing because he calls me Curious George because I'm curious about everything and I have to dive in. So I don't know why. Right away, I was like, wait, I should have put two and two together and be like, I wonder if he's dyslexic, because that is a trait that a lot of the guests have, is this curiosity.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think dyslexia has a negative connotation growing up, and that it was a label and it was a box people tried to put you in. And as time's gone on, I've learned a lot more about dyslexic thinking and some of the different advantages that you get from being dyslexic. And it's really a quite unique skill set to be dyslexic, because you can think very laterally and you can think very creatively. And I correlated it to visionary and an integrator, which is terms that we pulled from the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a framework for business management that we use. And what was really astonishing to me was when we looked at the results, only 10% of people in the world are visionaries and 90% are integrators. The hardest thing in the world is to actually make an idea come to life. So it's the integrators that are actually doing the hardest work. But being a visionary is actually a real skill set. And a lot of visionaries, 90% of them are dyslexic. So it's a pretty amazing label that was meant to put people in a box, or was putting people in a box, that actually is putting people in a box that are naturally thinking outside of the box.
Right. Right. I mean, I know Brent has a question because then I have about 35.
No, it's everybody talks about the 1%, financially, the 2%. I think we're even less than that, when it comes to, thinking outside the box. I know for myself, there's not a person, for some context, Juliet's the first person in 46 years of my life to understand me. So you go back to, I played pro hockey 18 years, around the world, Russia for 3 years. Nobody understood me. They looked at me with the old side head, so you talk about that entrepreneurial, that visionary aspect. How much of that do you think gets shot down? Because everybody looks like I'm a complete whack job. Everybody knows that. But to try and put that into a visionary and, into a product, such as yourself with a lacrosse ball.
Yeah. So I actually think it's interesting. I have a different perspective on this than I think most people, but I think it's the the visionary's responsibility to communicate well to integrators so that you can be understood. And in order to do that, you have to really understand yourself. And that is one of the hardest things in the world. So I have taken probably 30 personality assessments. I do a personality assessment with every single new team member we bring on board. And then we compare my personality assessment to theirs. And what I found is it really allows me to skip or vastly accelerate the norming, storming, performing phase of a relationship. And it allows people to understand that I appreciate their skill set and I cannot do what they do. I cannot integrate things. It's very, very hard for me. Yeah. We have, I think around 30 people full time now. And my leadership team is 5 people. And when I have a task come to me in an email or something, I don't know who's supposed to do it. I have no idea. It's very hard for me to connect who should do this day-to-day thing or be responsible for this day-to-day thing. But painting the picture of what the finished product looks like in 2027 comes so naturally to me. And it feels like I'm just right in my realm of like expertise. And I've now started my wife's an integrator. She's not a visionary. My brother's an integrator. He's not a visionary. My dad is a visionary, very clearly, has ADHD, dyslexia, definitely. And so just seeing those dynamics at play and caring as much as I do about the people close to me, it's really helped me to understand how to be a good visionary and how to use dyslexia as an advantage and not overburden people with these idealistic, abstract thoughts that will come true. 100%. We will make sure it happens, but I got to bring it back to day-to-day reality and then let the people who are strong integrators and closest to the information make the decisions, because I think visionaries make horrible decisions in day-to-day. I think they make phenomenal decisions on a 3 or 5 year horizon.
Yeah, I know it's funny. I always talk about, I know how to communicate with everybody, how each person learns very quickly. I'm Canadian, so am I talking to a Canadian? So I'm talking minus 52 Celsius, or am I talking minus 50 Fahrenheit, kilometers, to miles an hour? So, as you talked about that, that personality test, that's something that I've learned how to do in my own way. Each time, each person I can talk to, by a certain word I say, to how you react, to how I plant the seed, would you come back at me? So I talk about that all the time.
And one of the things that I think is really cool, and this is one of the reasons why we started this, is Brent started the Brent Sopel Foundation 6 years ago. He wasn't diagnosed until he was 32 when his daughter was diagnosed, but he didn't know even the word dyslexia. So I want to take it back, like, even though I wasn't diagnosed until later in life, there was like an understanding, because my dad and my sister, we struggled, and it was like an understanding of like strengths and weaknesses. My parents just did that really well innately. It's like, okay, you might not be great at this, but you're really good at that. So I was able to shine in things and not just think I sucked across the board. I also think I was born with a little bit of a spark. Like, I kind of was like, if someone's going to say that I suck, I'm going to tell them to go fuck off, and I'm going to figure it out.
I think we can all see that. Yeah,
exactly.
So I think I was just,
over there.
Right. But so I think I was just born that way. But one of the things that Brent and I get into a lot of discussion about, and we loved kind of talking to others that have that positive kind of attitude about it. Because I remember when I first met Brent, and he loves to talk about it, I was like, oh, you're really negative. Let's give him some positive. Like, I need to give you some sunshine. Let's kind of work on this. And then it was my dad actually that said, he's a realist. He's talking about the real stuff that we went through that maybe people don't want to talk about because it's vulnerable and we really don't want to get into the deep waters of it. So I would love to kind of know, when you were diagnosed, like when you kind of figured it out, how school was, and like how, what support and all that kind of stuff. If you can take us through that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So I was probably diagnosed, we'll take it before I was diagnosed, I was labeled as a troublemaker, and rightfully so. I mean, I
still am.
They tell a story. Yeah, I think I still am to a degree.
I definitely am.
But they tell us, my parents tell a story about when I was, I guess, first grade or second grade, and I pulled the fire alarm, and the fire department came. And so as soon as the fire department came, I was like, oh my God, I love the fire department. I pulled it like 5 days in a row. And the fifth day, they were like, you got to be kidding me. And so just, I had to apologize in front of the whole school. I had to like do this whole thing. And I thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And they were trying to use it as an example of scare me into not doing it. And so after the fifth time, they were like, all right, we're going to tape this, which probably now would not be okay, but they taped it shut so that it couldn't get pulled. So it was pretty. So then I fast forward. My parents split up, got divorced. I moved up to Jupiter and went to a new school, and so they had a rule that you couldn't get 15 detentions in a year, or you were expelled. I had 83 in my first year. I'll never forget it. And they did not expel me, thank the Lord. I think it was the grace of God. It was a Christian school, so I definitely used that to my advantage. And so then probably around fifth or sixth grade, they were like, there's definitely something wrong with this kid. We got to figure out what it is. And I kept getting in a lot of trouble. I kept struggling in school with just paying attention. So my homework grades were abysmal, like 0. I did not do homework. I thought it was busy work. I thought it didn't make any sense. But then tests, I wouldn't study for. I wouldn't pay attention in class, and I'd get consistently like 70s and 80s. And so they were like, this is kind of weird. We know he's not studying. We know he's not paying attention. And then somehow he's getting good marks just to like get by. And so then I was being tutored one day, and as I was writing, I would fall asleep in a one-on-one tutoring session. It's like remarkable how embarrassing that is when you get woken up by a tutor and you're one-on-one.
You're tired.
Yeah, I was hilarious. Like trying to pay attention to her. My eyes would just shut. So then finally we're doing something. I'll never forget it. I was writing on a math equation, and I would always get penalized for points for not showing my work the right way. Like the way I got to the number was just way different than the way they got to the number. And we got to the same number, but they would say I cheated. And I would say, no. I'll show you exactly how I got there. And they would be like, that's ass backwards. That makes no sense. And so, but whatever, there's the number. And so I constantly had to argue for points on every single test. I knew I was going to turn it in first. I was going to get a 70 to an 80. And if I stayed after class and negotiated, I could get it up to like an 85 and be comfortable. And then that would pull up my homework assignment. So, so in this tutoring session, I'm one-on-one, and I'm writing out a number, like a math number to answer a question. And I wrote the first number, the fourth number, the second number, the third number, then the fifth number. And I just naturally, that's just how I would write numbers. And so the tutor was like, can you do that again? Why? Like, what just happened? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, write your name. And I wrote my name, and I write the first letter, the third letter, the second letter, the fourth letter, the sixth letter. And that's just how it happened for me. And then, so she said that was dysnumbria or something like this. And then I got officially diagnosed. And then this was probably around like early 2000. So this was the time where my son does not have dyslexia. My son is not ADHD. My son is none of these things. And so I'm like, I don't know. This sounds like they're pretty on point. But it wasn't something that my parents were that open to in the beginning. And so I didn't start taking like Vyvanse or anything. I just kind of kept going and kept getting in trouble. And then I think it was around my sophomore year of high school where I had like a 2.1 GPA, and I was definitely smarter than that. My father had gotten us into investing in the stock market, and I became obsessed. I read every 10K that you could read. I just became because with ADHD, if you really like something, you lean into it super heavy. And if you don't, you check out completely. And so that became super evident. And because it became so evident, I had a 2.1 GPA, but I would be sitting on my phone in class and trading and doing like options and making like more than the teacher for sure. And so then when the teacher was chastising me, I was like, I don't know if you want to do that. So it just became this, it became very obvious that I wasn't learning the way everybody else was learning. This wasn't the right framework for me to be successful. And I felt at that point like I was dumb and like I was told I was dumb. I was told I was just going to be good at sports and that's fine. And that I didn't feel like that. I felt like I was smarter than the teachers that were teaching me and that I just didn't care about what they were like talking about, like clouds, like a Sirius cloud versus I don't give a shit. Like that's not what I want to do with my life. And then
so you had a bit of a spunk as yourself.
Yeah, you too.
I was kicked out of
by yourself.
Yeah, quite a few schools. I was asked to leave, but yeah, and then so I slipped in a really bad depression, and it was in large part I think because I didn't think that I would be successful in life. I didn't think that I was just told I wasn't going to be. And if sports were the only thing, I really loved playing sports. It's a lot of fun, but I didn't identify as only an athlete, and I didn't want to identify as only an athlete ever. And I think probably because I grew up in South Florida, where it was the 5 high schools that put the most players in the NFL over the last 50 years are within a 15-mile radius of each other in Miami-Dade County. Right. So I thought I was like going to go into the NFL like every South Florida kid. And then I get to varsity football my freshman year and I'm like 180, like maybe 165, 170 soaking wet, which was pretty big for a freshman. And we're going against guys like Matt Elam, who's now a linebacker on the Ravens, and he was like 230, like 6 foot, and like a man. And he was the running back, and I was the cornerback. And it was like, all right, I got to pick a different path in life here. So, yeah, I think that was kind of the journey. And then dyslexic thinking only recently came into my purview, probably in the last like 3 years. And that has been transformational because it really puts words to how you can use your dyslexic thinking as a huge advantage.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, it's so interesting. And Brent, I'm going to let you speak because I could go on and on, but I'm going to because I know I can see your face.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was going to say it is so fascinating just to hear everyone's story that we've had on, and then knowing our story. You know, having a son. Just knowing it's so crazy because it is that narrative of you're dumb, right? And even though you were like, I don't feel like I am, but I keep getting told there is something, right? Psychology out there. If you're being told something all the time, even if you're fighting it, right? It's going to happen, right? You're going to have those times where it's like, God damn, well, maybe I am like, okay, I need to think about this. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why Brent started the foundation, because he never wants a kid to feel that way. So like, we really want to change things from the bottom. That's like, we can find out early if someone has dyslexia, even if their parent is not diagnosed, because there's so many things that like the fact I never heard. And Brent, I don't know if the way that Dan wrote his name, which I think is fascinating because so my kids are Montgomery, Truman, and Penelope. Like Brent's like, why would you do that?
That's
How do you spell
abuse,
them?
Anyways.
And I was like, well, first of all, I have to say
a long name like that.
Yeah, I know. Well, I didn't know he was dyslexic then. I knew someone was going to be. But so I have to say they're like Montgome or I can't just write it without thinking. Like I have to spell his name. He has to do the same thing. And there's so many different things. Like if Dan, my husband and I were just going over the quarters, like Q1 and Q2. And I was like, he goes, did you literally, I had to go, okay, January, February, March.
Yeah.
I have to do that.
I have to do the same thing.
Yeah, I have to say that every time in my head to get to Q3. I can't just say Q3 is these dates. And when someone can just do it that quickly and they don't understand, like my husband literally said to me today, he's like, "Wait, honey, you've been in advertising. You can't just." And I was like, I will never be able to go just to Q3. I have to go through the alphabet. If someone says to me, "What number is this month?" I have to go through the whole thing. It's like what
Every
comes after
time.
B and D, or I mean, those are early, but like I have to go through the alphabet.
Yep, I
Right?
am the
And
same
I
exact
can't
way.
spell.
Yeah.
I got to spell the month, like the date. Everybody's like 1/12/03. I'm like, what the hell is that? I spell, no, January. I can't get those correlations. I can never. What was that work the other day? They're like, oh, can you say the alphabet backward? I'm like, I can't say it forwards.
Well, but it's so crazy. I was telling Brent one time, Montgomery had a concussion and we went to the doctor.
Yeah.
This is when we were in Connecticut. And the doctor was like, parents did try to push their kids through, right? Okay. So I'm not going to say like we weren't in a town. They were like, can't you just mask it? He has to play. Da, da, da. So this doctor was a little on the defense. So I'll leave it at that. But the doctor literally said, say the alphabet backwards. And Montgomery goes, what? I can't do that. And he's like, I think you're concussed. And I was like, pause. I was like, he's dyslexic. Then he asked him to spell something. I go, I just told you and then the guy literally was like, Mom, you need to stay out of this. And I was like, no, I can't do those things. And I don't have a concussion. Then he asked him another thing. And I go, if this is really how you find out about concussions, I was like, this is so ridiculous because you're not thinking about how someone learned. And I literally got into this giant argument with this doctor because it's like, you can't just do that. No, who says about alphabet backwards?
I think that is a huge advantage of dyslexia is that you would be willing to challenge the doctor, where most linear thinkers would say that's a doctor, they're the subject matter expert. But I 100% agree with you. He was wrong. Black and white, it's obvious as day. He was wrong.
So
and
wrong.
He had been told he was right by 90% of the world every day of his life. And then you come along and just rock his world. And it makes people shut down to ideas, which is a huge flaw in society because we're not right about most things in the world right now. And we could become more right as time goes on if we're open-minded to the fact that we're probably wrong. But
I don't to that point is, you're right. They've been told they're right, but they don't know this side. They've never heard of dyslexia. They've never heard of what that means, right? So they can't be open-minded to something they've never heard of. It's that, it's that narrative out there. It's the more that we talk about this, the more like, people talk about like, you talk about everything. Like my documentary is one where raw. I'm like, because my story is not about me. It's who might hear it. So that doctor's never heard of dyslexia. Like I didn't hear the word till I was 32. So, in defense of a lot of these people is they don't even know what we're talking about. They think that we're crazy or whack jobs because it is so out there that they've never been educated on this part of it. So that's why we started this. That's why I'm open about it. That's why I talk about it. So maybe someone hears the word dyslexia that you kind of bat at somebody, because I do it all the time. And people are like, what are you talking about? Like you're out to lunch. You got no idea. Well, when I educate them a little bit, they're like dead stop their tracks going, huh, I never knew that.
Well, because a lot of times people think it's just like flipping the B's and D's, right? Like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. And it's as Brent says, if you're wealthy or have some sort of support, it can be great, right? Because yes, we have all these awesome skills and we can bring so much to the table and we can really bring so much better things than just an average person. But if you're poor and whatever, you don't have the resources, you're kind of screwed. Like if you don't ever have that person that's like, okay, let's kind of figure this out. Or you're just like, you can't read, you're doing things different. And you never get that support where you just constantly continue to think you're just dumb and you have to figure it out. So like one of the things that fascinated me when, for Brent, with him being in the NHL and being in Canada, it was like, okay, you can't read, you can't do this. We're just going to push you through. Like, and then you go in and you're a professional athlete, right? And you don't know, like, one day you're going to have to get out and you're going to have to be in the real world. Like, what a mind fuck is that? Like, it's like, okay, I know I have these skills, but I also had a group of people that never even cared to be like, well, why is he struggling? Like, you had people that were like, let's figure this out. Why is he struggling? Right. I had people in my life that were like, okay, well, this doesn't add up. Why doesn't it? No one did that for him. No one said, why isn't this adding up?
In the sports world, nobody tries to find how each person learns. ADHD, we always talk about, I'm like, until I talk to, buddies, I'm like, how many, we call them drill busters that screw up the drill every time. I'm like, they're ADHD. They don't teach them.
Drill killers.
So you got to coach each person differently. You can't yell across the field. You want to play. You can't yell across the field to a kid, somebody ADHD. The words don't get to them.
Yeah.
When my daughter played lacrosse, she had to go off of, not lefts and rights, off posts, right? Do coaches know that? Are you coaching the way they need to learn, or they need to hear that? 99% of them aren't.
Yeah. And on that point, I think it's important to recognize too that even though you weren't told that you were dyslexic, you didn't figure it out until you were 32, you're still where you're at. You're still very successful. You still found ways to bust through the glass ceilings. You have a great family. You care about your family. You're a good person. Like, all of these things, I think, are a function of the last 32, the 32 years before that, and the challenges that only you knew you were going through, and you might not even know you were going through them.
No.
But it helps you to become a creator and to become somebody that can start something like this podcast that can change how people think about things, where somebody without dyslexia that is maybe just not as smart as everybody else, they're at a real disadvantage because they don't have the mindset of dyslexia. I think gives you an advantage in life. I think people have tried to say that it doesn't because they didn't have dyslexia.
No, it's the hard part is that
it's a huge advantage.
They think are crazy. Like the things that I've gone through in my life, they don't see it. So it's that portion of what we're doing right now. That's why we started this. That's why I talk about it. Is the doctors. There's other ways out there. You look at a picture, we're going to see different things. So that that dyslexic thinking, it can be a blessing. But we got to have support. And there's going to be some understanding. It's that community. It's that connection that we can grow that together. Because when you stand on an island by yourself every day, it gets hard. You get beaten down. That's why I've been sober 7 years. Almost died with all the drugs and alcohol. It was to get away from myself. It was to get away to feeling alone and being on like I'm stupid. And I still feel that every day. So it's having these conversations that you're not, and it's okay to, we think differently, we learn differently, and you're not alone.
Absolutely. And I think the addictive personality is something I really struggled with too. And the depression that I mentioned earlier was definitely driven by a lot of the same things that you just shared. And I think that's part of ADHD and dyslexic thinking is you can get so hyper-focused and so obsessive about things and so addictive. And it's addictive personality that drives that. And you just got to make sure you hone it into the right things.
Yeah. Now, when you went through the depression, how did you come out on the other side? Like if someone's listening to this and they're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I've gone through it, but I didn't know how to get on the other side.
So the thing that stands out the most to me is a moment where I finally opened up to my dad, who is a Italian, like old school. You don't really show that stuff.
As I call my buddies, stubborn Italians.
Yeah. So I told him, we were sitting in the car. We had just gotten back to the house. We were in front of the garage. And I said, Dad, I got to tell you something. I've been really struggling with depression, and I almost took my life. And by the grace of God, it didn't work, essentially. And I need to open up about this. And he turned to me and said what I was not expecting, which was, you selfish freaking, are you kidding me? It's like, look at all the people who have poured into you, and all these coaches and all these parents, friends, and you run away from the house and you have somewhere to go every single time, and Like, this is just what a selfish perspective you have. He didn't park. He drove me to the field where I grew up playing sports, and he said, "Get out, go find a team, and you're going to coach." He said, "You need to do something for somebody else and stop thinking about yourself." And I get goosebumps saying it because it changed my entire life. I walked out on the field, I coached for the first time, and it was just this feeling of I can't think about myself. I can't think about the things in my own head and driving myself insane. I have to pour into this group of kids here because I was fortunate to have people pour into me, and I'm sure they were going through their own stuff, and they put that to the side, stepped on the field, and gave me everything they had. And now it's my turn to do that. And that transformed my entire life.
It's funny that you say that, where I'm working, I'm a hockey director. Last 4 months has been the worst 4 months of my life with these people. The coaches that I coach, my bosses they're the worst people, that I've ever met in my life. And they're driven by money and ego. And I'm driven by the kids. And it's funny that you said that, Julie, I coach with, because I struggled. I care about self-esteem. They're led by ego and money. So it's funny that you said it that way, because that's me every day, right, Juliet?
Yeah, no, but that's the connection. So that's what I mean. I think it's, again, right. I was like, oh, Dad, no, you need to hug him and be like, are you okay? But your dad did the best that he could, right? He was like, whoa.
And he knew what I needed. And I needed that.
Yes.
That was what I needed. I didn't need a hug. I didn't need that. It wouldn't have worked for me.
Yeah.
And he knew was so blessed to have him in my life.
No, but that's what the thing that I think is amazing is and we talk about, we've talked about this many times, parental matches, right? And when you're a parent, are you really an actual match for your kid? And my son that is dyslexic, we are 100% a match. Like, I remember every once in a while he would have a moment, be like, why? Like, why is it easier for this kid? And I would always give him this and I would say this thing, and it's really ridiculous, but he will remember. I'm like, honey, okay, first of all, you have a beautiful soul, you have a beautiful heart. And this is when he was little, you're kind and you're funny and you're handsome and you're athletic. Could you imagine if you were like ugly and you were like a jerk and you had like one leg and you were dyslexic? And he would go, oh, that's terrible, Mom. Okay. And he would like skip off, and I'd be like, okay. And it was like what he needed to hear. And I would say to him, you're allowed to have a moment, right? Things are hard. Yeah, I get it. I get it, because I have been there and it sucks. And you're allowed to have a moment. But guess what? This is your life. And you got to put your pants on the same way every time. And you're going to have to figure this out. Like, you can have a pity party for yourself for a little bit, but then you got to move on. You can't sit and stay in that low for too long, because you got to figure it out, because you have too much to offer to the world. So that's how I always talked to him, right? Even when he was little and he was nervous to do things. And now I know it was because he couldn't process. And he was like, what if I screw up, and all these different things? And I would I'd be like, I'm counting to 5. You said you wanted to do, baseball. I'm counting to 5. And he would go, oh, but Mom, what if, and I'd be like, stop playing the what if. We're going to leave, and then you'll never play. And he would go, and I would see him biting his nails, and then he would go out, and then he would come back, and he'd be like, Mom, thank you for pushing me. Oh, and we had to do that with everything that he did. He didn't do any sports until he was probably 6 years old, because we lived in the city. And I remember being in the park and being like, oh, do you want to do like soccer with the kids? How fun. And he'd be like, no. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to push him. Right. Dan and I played sports. I played college sports. So I was like, this kid's going to be athletic. Like, this is what brought me joy, right? This is what brought me my confidence. I got to figure this out with him. He would always say no. And then I realized it was him saying no because he was scared, because he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't want to put himself out there. So I had to push him, and I had to make him not be this neurotic little kid that he could have been. I mean, we laugh about it now. I'm like, do you know how fucked up I could have made you? I could have fucked you like so much if I like fed into half of the shit. And he'd be like, no, I thank God all the time that you weren't that mom that was like, okay, he's nervous, I'm just not going to push him. I pushed him. You're going to do it.
That's so awesome. That is so amazing. Yeah.
It's not easy as a parent though, right? And people would look at me on the sideline and be like, oh my God, you're so, and I'm like, nope, this is what he needs.
This is what he needs. And only you really know what the players on your team need, and what the kids in your life need, and what the people in your life need, your significant other even. And it's so important that we pour into the people around us so we all grow together. And I think that's what builds real connection and real long-term relationships, is growing together.
And that's the hard part of, relationships and parenting is, in the dyslexic world, if your, husband or wife or, the mom or dad don't have dyslexia, because they're not going to, they're not going to put what you just talked about, being pushed, right? You knew what he needed, but from the other side of the fence, Dan's like, what are you doing? You're, not saying, I'm just using technical, you're an idiot. Why are you doing it? Because he's not dyslexic. So, it's having these conversations and, relationships, marriages, with an extra empathy chip of it, I dated, they're like, what are you doing? Stop being like, enough of the kind, that's who we are. So it's, again, it goes back to that understanding, on both sides of the fence, mom and dad or whoever has it. It's, that connection, the people that have it, it's trying to get the people that don't have it to they'll never understand, but just to, understand a little bit.
100%. Yeah. And it's amazing what you guys are doing to bring it to light and to help people better understand it. My mom did not have it. My mom and my brother were very close and definitely resonated with each other. My dad had it, and me and my dad naturally got along a little bit better. And it wasn't that my mom didn't want to help me. She really wanted to help me, I'm sure. And we now have a great relationship and mutual respect. But I didn't live with her for quite some time because she wanted me to do things a certain way, and I couldn't help it. It was like everything inside of me wanted to do it right. I hated getting in trouble. I had this like gut feeling every time. I was like, not again. I know this. I know exactly what's going to happen. This sucks. I screwed up. I'm wrong. I know. I get it. But it wasn't a choice. It was like I couldn't stop myself from doing the things that were getting me in trouble.
I always say, for us, we struggle when we pick up that first book when we're 2 months old or whatever that is. It's easier to go down that quasi-bad path than good path. Like, just make good decisions. It's not that easy. When you've been told and beaten down for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, if you tell a girl in high school she's fat every day, guess what? That's going to be her life. I'll just make that right decision. Yeah, that's so easy for you guys to say. But when you have nothing, you feel like you're worthless. When you got no self-esteem, you're basically the bottom of a well. You expect us to make that right decision. So, that's almost an impossible decision for us to make. People don't understand that. Like, who wants to get yelled at? Who wants? We're not trying. That's where we are in our life. There's two roads. That was our road.
Yeah, everybody wants to do a great job. It just, what does a great job look like? And I think for me, part of always getting in trouble was there are rules in place that people put there that may or may not be correct. And I definitely was fully aware that they may or may not be correct. And when I would challenge them and say, well, why is this the way it is? And they would say, that's the way it's always been. That is the worst answer in the entire world. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Yeah, it's like, well, we all used to live until we were like 30 because there was no medicine. So should we go do that more? That makes no sense. And even questioning, I got in a lot of trouble questioning God and questioning the Bible and questioning religion, which you would imagine at a Christian school would be well received, right? This is where you come to learn about this stuff. That was not the case. I read the Bible all the way through twice before I was in 8th grade. So 6th, 7th grade. I read it all the way through twice just so I could, because this is supposed to be the framework for how we live our entire lives. I should better understand this. And I became obsessive about it. And then I read it, and then I would get in trouble for things, and I would say, well, in the Bible it says this. Can you explain how does that happen here? And they would say, well, they just wouldn't have good answers. And I would say that's not going to cut it. Like, I need something more tangible. And then I'll never forget the one was, well, that's where faith steps in. It's like, you got to do better than that. That's just not going to cut it here.
And they can't think any other way, right? Like, those answers aren't right for you. Like you're saying that they're not, because their brain doesn't go that way. So they can't even give us, a good, whatever answer they came up with, it wasn't good enough for us because it didn't line up. I say this all the time. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Help me. This doesn't make sense. They're like, shut the fuck up. This is it. Right. So again, look at, they're wrong. It's the education that they're never going to give us the answer we want because it's completely in the left field for us because of how our brain works.
And, it's so interesting, that whole questioning thing, because I always, I question everything. I mean, I do. And I'll question, I'm like, I'm not trying to call it bullshit on you. I just want to understand, like, explain it to me. Right. I'm not trying to get into a fight with you. Right. I mean, that's what Brent is dealing with all the time at the rink. And that's why he's just there for the kids. He just wants to be for the kids.
Yeah, everybody takes it the wrong way.
No, but what's interesting?
It's hard to think about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have 2 other kids that are not dyslexic, but I've taught them, like, question everything. I don't care who it is. Don't do it rudely, right? You're not a rude kid, but if something's not sitting with you, call someone out on it. And it's a really important thing, but it's not enough people do it, and that's why I think things are so screwed up. Because people are like, well, it's just because that's how it's always been. And I like in education, having it, again, we talk about this all the time, going into these IEP meetings. And this is what, again, why we started this and why Brent started his, because none of it makes sense and none of it
What is IEP?
So that's the individual educational plan. So that's like what you get. Like, so if you're diagnosed and you have it, so it goes, and the special ed teachers are supposed to, they don't read it until here. And it's not the teacher's fault. It's coming from above, right? They're getting too overloaded. But there's so many things. Every meeting that I would have all these, I would question, and they would, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to ask you, why are you doing it that way? That doesn't make sense.
That's crazy.
If he has all these strengths, why do you keep going? Like, he's dyslexic. He's dyscalculic. He's not going to be a mathematician. So let's just get through math. Why do you keep saying, we need to strengthen this? We need to strengthen that. Yes, I do think you can strengthen some things, but there's a lot of stuff that it is what it is, and just leave it. Like, stop harping in it. Like, stop telling him 100%. All the things that he sucks at. We know he doesn't 100%. Need to be, he doesn't need to be reminded. So let's go to the things that he's good at. This kid memorized, and we didn't know he was dyslexic until he was in 2nd and 3rd grade because he memorized chapter books because, like, who does that? That's amazing. Right. But and he didn't even realize, like, he's like, oh, I just would listen and I just would stick. So then I would be able to do it. But I didn't know I couldn't read. Right. We didn't know. And so it's just those things that you have to question. And that's one of the reasons, again, why we're bringing this. And I'm going to go back to the lacrosse ball. Like, you got hit with the lacrosse ball. So can you take us through that a little bit? Because I think it's also good for people to hear that journey.
I will. And I think leading into that, I didn't mention this, but I was also put into the special ed classes from the time I was in 6th or 7th grade until I was a junior or a senior in high school. And I was in classes with people that I knew. I first of all, the most amazing people in the world are the people who are in those classes, because they're just authentic and genuine and just like the most amazing people. And they're so misunderstood. And it's I think a lot of the same, where I was watching something about people with Asperger's, and the way that they think and the way that they communicate. They can understand us. They can understand each other. We can't understand them. So who's really struggling? And that just like totally changed my perspective on it, because and the genuine, just how genuine people were, how authentic people were. I really liked it. So, but all my friends that were on all my teams would be like, ha ha ha, ESE classes, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm the smartest kid in my class. Are you? It's like, no. So
yeah, but it is. We were talking about this because I had some like people from high school since we started this, be like, I'm dyslexic too. We never would say, oh, I'm just like, you knew you were in these classes. And again, I played, so all my friends weren't in those classes, and they'd be like, where are you going? But all of those kids we always still, the ones that I'm still connected with through social media, we say we always just had this understanding. They were always the troublemakers. They were usually the boys. There were some girls in there, but we would always give each other a nod and be like, I know I got your back, even though we're not in the same group, right? You run with maybe with a different type of kids, whatever. But I always gave you respect because you saw me and I saw you, and we know what we go through. And
that gives me goosebumps.
Right. But it's like, and they were like, you were always so
true.
nice. And I was like, what do you mean I was always so nice? Like, why wouldn't I have been nice, first of all? And they were like, yeah, but you ran with the group that wasn't always nice. And I'm like, they were, you just didn't know them, right? They didn't seem like they were nice, but they actually were really good people. But because we were in this, and you heard me struggle with reading, you heard me not being able to do this. And I felt dumb in other classes, but we sat there and we just looked at each other like, I get you. And that's this whole purpose is I get you. I understand you. I see you. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm going to say it because I always say it and I hadn't say it this way. Dyslexia is not, Brad's going to laugh. Dyslexia has nothing to do with your IQ. It is a learning style. And that's what is so misunderstood. It's like, oh, and the shame behind it. Cause you feel like, oh, maybe I am dumb, but it's not. Usually we're smarter.
Yeah, I would challenge you on that to say that it is correlated to IQ in a positive way, because the things that we can do laterally thinking, and this brings me to the story of the lacrosse ball. So my father was big on us paying rent and to stay at his house. So he had us work from the time we were like as old as we could. He could bring us out and like have us work in the yard. And he would have a group of, we were in South Florida, so there was a group of Guatemalan guys that would come over to the house, and we would all work outside, side by side. And it was such an amazing place for him to teach us like values. And we didn't realize what we were learning at the time, but work ethic, just treating everybody with respect. It doesn't matter where anybody's from. There's stuff you can learn from every single person. Watching guys that maybe had come from a new country to an area that had kids that had a family that were just selflessly sacrificing and doing this manual labor as hard as they were, and just with a positive attitude the whole time, and all of these things that he was teaching us along the way. And then when we got into high school, or when I got probably 13, 14, we had done this for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years at that point, and we got paid $8 an hour, minimum wage. And so, and then I'm starting to think I could make more than minimum wage. There's definitely a way for me to make more than minimum wage. So we set up mango stands, stole the neighbors' mangoes, and then sold them back to the neighborhood. Whatever we could do to make more than $8 an hour. And so that led me to, I was in South Florida. I thought I was going to go into the NFL. When I got into my freshman year, I realized pretty quickly, this is probably not the path. So let me pick a different sport that I can definitely win at. And lacrosse was pretty new in Florida. So the time it was like, I could do this. This sounds good. And so fortunately we had amazing coaches, and I was able to I got very obsessive again and got to an All-American by my junior year and then senior year as well. So my junior year, nobody had really committed to play Division I lacrosse in Florida. Not many people had. And so we started, we learned about, if you're a specialist, you can charge $80 an hour. And so I was like, that's a lot more than $8 an hour. Let's do private lessons for kids. And so we started doing that, and that grew to like 30 kids a week. So we were making pretty damn good money for high school kids. And and so then that was my first exposure to management, which was a nightmare. I hired some of my buddies to like go out and do the lessons, and then I would schedule everything. And it turns out like the first thing on the checklist is lacrosse balls. You got to have those for training, right? These guys would show up without lacrosse balls. It's like, how are you going to do the lesson? That's just not going to work. So I'd get calls from parents, and they'd be like, what's going on here? So then I'm stretching my senior year, and I'm like, I can't take this with me. These kids are here. I can't bring them to St. John's and train them up in New York. So I got to come up with some other way to make money. And a ball ricocheted off the post while we were stretching, and I picked it up, and growing up in South Florida, I played a lot of golf. There was always different quality levels to a golf ball. And so when I picked it up and I looked at it, I said, like these go bad after 2 weeks. What if we just made a premium one that didn't go bad after 2 weeks and lasted 4 weeks? The players would get more out of every rep. The coaches would get more out of every practice. And we called greasers, when the ball greases over, we call it a drill killer. So now we don't have as many drill killers and we get more out of it. And it just kind of made sense that if I could figure this out, I could sell this as many times and I don't need a full staff to manage, or so I thought. And so that was really the impetus of it. And I think the dyslexia allowed me to think laterally of golf and the different quality levels of a golf ball, and then lacrosse, and just connect the dots that I guess nobody had before.
I love that.
So,
I love that.
yeah,
And I think I cut every ball open. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, tell me your feeling about lacrosse getting accepted to the Olympics. Eh? We got softball, the best sport, curling, and winter sport. Tell me, I'm Canadian from God's country. Been from upstate New York is where I played, my minor hockey. That's where my kids were born in Syracuse. So my sons are big lacrosse people. Daughters played. So I couldn't shoot left-handed, so I sucked. But what's your feeling of the Olympics being, lacrosse being accepted, as an Olympic sport?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And I know a lot of the people at the top of the sport that have been really pushing for that for a long time. And it's just really amazing to see it come to fruition. And I think the pro league that's going on right now, the PLLs, a friend of mine, Paul Rabel, who started that, and him and his brother have just done a tremendous job bringing the sport to the stage that it deserves to be at this point. And I think you're seeing a lot of correlations to hockey back 15, 20 years ago. It's right at that same point where it's ready to take off, and it's a great sport. And I think the more sports that there are and the more opportunities kids have to play sports and to find the sport that makes the most sense for them, the better the world's going to be. Team sports are so important. Individual sports have their place and they're very important as well. But sports in general is such an important thing for the world to have. And it's a vacuum where you can teach a value system that you just don't get anywhere else.
Lacrosse is a lot of correlations with hockey. Hand-eye coordination. It's a great sport. It's a cheaper sport compared to hockey. Hockey's out of its mind. They've turned it into a business. It's not a sport anymore. It pisses me off. $300 for a stick. So, it's under the price tag. For equipment and stuff. It's affordable. We're able to do great things with it, and be able to access for many kids that can't play hockey. It's now become a rich man sport. So it's a great sport. I love the contact. Girls, they blow the whistle every time. They got boo-boo. It's so boring.
It's when you get better, they don't blow the whistle all the time, but yes.
My daughter plays. She was pulling a china shop. She's running everybody over.
The new women's pro league is loosening the rules on shooting space and different stuff like that in women's. So you're starting to see a version of the women's game that's really, really fun to watch.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, so many different things. Can you also take us through what you're doing in Africa? Because I know LinkedIn is where people can find you.
Yeah.
Spell your last name because I'm not going to say it again.
S like Sam, O, V like Victor, IERO, which that's a good win for me to spell it right the first time. So,
and also this is why I also love this podcast. I love all my podcasts, but I love this one because I can be like, other times I have to write it, oh fuck, but now I can be like, it's just my dyslexia. So you do that part because you know it, and there go. But yes, tell us what you're doing in Africa because I know on LinkedIn people can follow you there.
Yeah, so we started Signature Lacrosse to make a better lacrosse ball. We got into complete sticks. They all come game ready right off the shelf. We got into quick connect goals. Instead of stringing the net to the goal frame, you screw it in. It takes 5 minutes instead of 2 hours. Rebounders that are collapsible, that break down, are easy to travel with. So it was really taking problems in the market and solving them. And in the process, we identified that the real biggest problem in sports, youth sports, that we could solve is ordering custom uniforms, and team swag is a nightmare. And so we looked into it, and really it's like a supply chain, value chain problem. And so by layering in technology to just streamline the communication of the order information to the actual maker, the factory, we eliminated the error rate in the market, which was 10%. So 10% of all custom team uniforms and apparel orders in the United States and Canada, North America, have an error. That's ridiculous. That makes no sense.
Brent knows this because he does this for the
you deal with this. It's ridiculous that it's been 20 years and it's been done the same exact way. And like screen printing is still the main form of decorating. Makes no sense. Screen printing was invented hundreds of years ago. That makes no sense. So we put a man on the moon and we can't fix this? Doesn't make
but did we put him on the moon?
Never know. Question everything.
Yeah.
So that evolved into first, if we're going to build a lacrosse company in Tampa, there's got to be youth lacrosse in Tampa. So I was committed to continuing coaching for the rest of my life, and so started coaching locally and building a youth program that was really struggling. We helped turn it around. And then that really launched this philanthropic effort here locally. My wife, who you met, Maddie, is amazing, and she has helped to really grow lacrosse. There's thousands of players now in Tampa playing lacrosse, and in large part thanks to her and a group of people that have just really poured back into the community in a super selfless way. And so the first attempt at philanthropy was locally, and then the second was how can we do this internationally? And so we found a friend actually reached out through LinkedIn. We connected, Andrew Mamawi, and he is a phenomenal guy. He's a man of God. He's a local Ugandanese gentleman, and just really cares about that community and that group of people. And so he is our champion in the area, and he's really the one doing the amazing work, and we're just behind the scenes supporting him as much as we can. And we're going on our 4th year of partnership with him. I meet with him a lot more frequently, and now that he's gotten everything really going, he's a pretty busy man. There's about 400 kids playing year round in Uganda at this point.
Awesome.
It's been adopted by, I think, 6 schools as an official sport. So it's a sanctioned sport in 6 schools in Uganda.
Amazing.
It's unbelievable. So this is the first year we're doing a trip down there in the summer. We'll bring a group of college players. Everyone will pay. I think it's like 2 weeks or 10 days or something. Everybody pays like a very reasonable price. All the profits go to Kids Lacrosse Africa, and that builds their annual budget every year. So it's a cool way to connect the local community that we've poured into to another community that somebody else is pouring into, and to help really grow the game and give more kids the opportunity to experience the power of sports.
Amazing. I love that. I mean, it's, and I love what I love that we connected on LinkedIn, because you were like, my wife is a great story, and she does. And it's actually totally reminded me. I did butcher her name. And I think when I told her I was dyslexic, and she's like, oh, Dan's dyslexic. That's how I think I knew it, because I couldn't say your last name. And so, but everything that you guys are doing, it's the empathy. We talk about that with dyslexics. We do have an extra empathy chip. Sometimes it's hard because we feel so deeply when we really care. When we love our people, we love our people. Like, our people know that we love them, and it's a beautiful gift. But at times it can be hard. It can be hard if it's not, the other side. And so I really appreciate you joining Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. And Brent, is there anything that you want to end with?
No, have you guys thought, following tracking? Obviously, everybody's talking about, digital, putting a chip in your ball for, practice to be able to read, obviously, accuracy. There's so many more things where my brain goes. Just curious.
We're on the front end of that. Yeah.
I've been saying,
Yeah.
the golf balls, a top golf can. Why can't we? Why can we put chip a golf ball? Right? Titleist doesn't want it, but I got a whole
It's
lot.
almost, yeah. It's almost like we think the same way.
Well, I knew you guys were gonna. I knew you guys would get it.
I gotta say, thank you guys so much for everything you're doing for this, and bringing dyslexia to light, and really showing people that it is a superpower and you can really use it to your advantage.
Yeah, no. And again, thank you, for sharing, because it's not always easy to talk about the depression and the hard times, and, being that kid in school that the teachers were like, oh, here they come again. But it's important to talk about. Right. The fire. Yeah. I love that story, by the way. Story. But it is, it's those stories that connect with other people. Because again, I say it all the time, stories connect us. Those stories, someone might listen to this and be like, you know what? My kid sounds like Dan. Maybe I need to dive a little bit into this, right? Let me dive in before the depression starts. Let me do it. And that's why we're doing this. We're trying to get ahead of it. And we know that we can because of having these kind of conversations. So we appreciate it, Dan. And, again, thank you for joining Dyslexia Exposed. Not Dyslexia Exposed. Word blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. Adi, take that out.
What about rate, review, your favorite ending?
I know, I did. That's what I was doing. And I got I got sidetracked. And I had a little attention deficit moment there. So yes, please rate, review, share. You guys, we've talked about this all the time. You don't know who you can save or who needs to hear this with this episode. Again, someone can listen to this episode and be like, you know what? Let me check in with my kid because there's something going on. Or, you know what? My neighbor was just telling me that their child is going through something. Let me share this episode. And it sounds so silly, but it really actually can save a life. So don't forget to rate, review, and share. Thanks again.